Everyone thought I was crazy for buying the forgotten house for $10. They didn't know I wasn't just buying a home, I was buying a secret that would soon put Earth on the galaxy's most dangerous map. Everyone thought I was crazy. The clerk at the town hall, a woman with a magnificent beehive hairdo that looked like it had been lacquered in place since the Kennedy administration, actually laughed when I slid the crumpled $10 bill across the counter. "Son," she said, peering at me over her bifocals, "are you sure you know what you're getting into? The Blackwood place ain't just abandoned. It's forgotten. On purpose." I just smiled and nodded. I'm good with my hands. A little sweat equity is all it needs. That was the understatement of the century. I'd seen the pictures in the municipal auction listing. The house was a skeletal wreck on the edge of a town that was itself barely clinging to life. It was a place the world had passed by, a relic of a failed logging boom from 100 years ago. The city council was practically giving away blighted properties to anyone willing to sign a contract promising to make them habitable within 2 years. Failure to do so meant they'd just seize it back. For $10, it was a risk I was more than willing to take. My life in the city had become a suffocating loop of rent payments, traffic, and a soul-crushing job in data entry. I was 32 years old, with calluses on my fingers from a keyboard, not from building anything real. I craved something tangible, a project I could pour myself into, something that would be mine. This house, this $10 disaster, was my escape hatch. The drive out there was a slow transition from civilization to wilderness. Paved highways gave way to cracked asphalt, then to gravel roads that wound through dense, silent forests. When I finally pulled up to the property, the reality of it hit me harder than the photos ever could. The house sagged in the middle, its spine broken. The porch tilted at a drunken angle, and the paint had peeled away in long gray strips, revealing the weathered wood beneath like exposed bone. Windows were smashed out, dark, vacant eyes staring into nothing. The yard was a jungle of weeds and thorny bushes, with a pair of ancient skeletal oak trees standing guard like grim sentinels. But as I stood there, keys dangling from my hand, I didn't feel regret. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was my mountain to climb. The first week was pure, back-breaking labor. I attacked the overgrown yard with a machete I'd bought at an army surplus store, clearing a path to the front door. The air inside the house was thick and heavy, a cocktail of mildew, rot, and the dust of half a century. Every surface was coated in a fine gray powder. Spiders had been the primary architects for decades, and their webs draped from the ceilings like macabre chandeliers. There were no ghosts, just the oppressive silence and the weight of forgotten time. I started with the basics, tearing out anything that was too rotten to save. I filled a rented dumpster with crumbling drywall, moldy insulation, and furniture that had decayed into mulch. I worked from sunrise to sunset, fueled by cheap coffee and the sheer satisfaction of seeing progress, however small. I was making a dent. I was imposing order on the chaos. It was during the third week, when I finally started tackling the main living room, that things took a strange turn. The floor was a disaster. Most of the original hardwood planks were warped and buckled from years of moisture. I was prying them up one by one with a crowbar, planning to lay down a new subfloor. It was tedious, repetitive work. The rhythm of it pry, lift, stack, repeat, had become almost meditative. I was working my way toward the center of the room when my crowbar met a section of flooring that felt different. It wasn't just old and soft. It felt oddly solid, yet hollow underneath. The sound was wrong. Instead of the splintering creak of old oak, the crowbar made a dull, resonant thud. I stopped, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of a gritty glove. I knelt down and knocked on the boards with my knuckles. It was unmistakable. There was a void beneath this spot. My first thought was a cistern or an old root cellar, common in houses of this age. But according to the rudimentary blueprints I'd gotten from the town hall, there was no cellar. The house was built on a simple stone foundation. Curiosity, the same impulse that had led me to buy this wreck in the first place, took over. I focused my efforts on that one section. The boards were fitted together with a precision that was out of place with the rest of the house's shoddy construction. They weren't nailed down, they were interlocked like a puzzle. It took me another hour of careful prying and wiggling before the central plank finally came loose. With a groan of protest it lifted free. I tossed it aside and peered into the darkness, my heart thudding in my chest. I expected to see damp earth, maybe the stone foundation, a haven for spiders and snakes. I clicked on my headlamp, its bright beam cutting through the gloom. But the light didn't hit dirt. It hit metal. I tore up the surrounding boards with a renewed frantic energy. Soon I had exposed a perfect square, about 4 feet by 4 feet. It wasn't wood. It was a single, seamless sheet of dark, matte-finished metal that didn't have a speck of rust on it. It felt cool and smooth to the touch, utterly alien compared to the decaying wood around it. There was no handle, no hinges, no visible lock. It was a featureless plate set into the floor. How was this possible? This house was built in the 1920s. What kind of material was this? I pushed on it, but it wouldn't budge. I tried to wedge my crowbar into the seam, but there was no seam to be found. It was as if it was fused with the very foundation of the earth. Frustration mounted. I stood up, took a step back, and in a moment of sheer exasperation, I stomped my work boot down hard on the center of the metal plate. It didn't clang. It chimed, a low, resonant tone that hummed through the soles of my feet and up my spine, and then with a hiss of displaced air that sounded like a sigh, the entire square began to descend. It lowered silently into the darkness below, like a futuristic elevator platform. My jaw went slack. My headlamp beam followed it down, revealing not a musty cellar, but the top of a staircase. The stairs were made of the same impossible, dark metal. They descended into a clean, geometric shaft. And from the depths, a soft, pale blue light began to emanate, growing brighter as the platform locked into place at the bottom. The air that rose up to meet me wasn't the damp, earthy smell of a cellar. It was cool, sterile, and carried the faint electric scent of ozone, like the air after a thunderstorm. It was the air of a place that had never known decay, a place that had been waiting, sealed and silent, under the floor of this rotting house for who knows how long. I stood at the edge of the abyss, my entire body buzzing with a mixture of terror and an irresistible urge to see what was down there. The logical part of my brain was screaming at me to run, to get in my truck, drive back to the town hall, and give them their $10 back. But I couldn't move. My gaze was fixed on that gentle blue glow. It was pulling me in, whispering promises of a secret that defied all reason. My breath hitched in my throat, each inhale a sharp, cold shock against the humid, decaying air of the house above. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, balanced on the precipice between two separate worlds. Above me was the familiar reality of rot and ruin, a project I understood, a challenge I had chosen. Below was something else, something impossible. The calm, steady blue light was a siren's call, promising knowledge that no human was meant to have. Every instinct for self-preservation screamed at me to slam the floorboards back down, bury the secret, and pretend it never happened. But I couldn't. I was the guy who bought a $10 house nobody wanted. Caution wasn't exactly my defining trait. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I swung my leg over the edge. My work boot met the first step with a soft, resonant hum, a stark contrast to the creaking wood I'd grown accustomed to. The metal was cool but not cold, and it seemed to absorb the sound of my footsteps completely. I was descending into a realm of absolute silence. My headlamp felt foolishly inadequate, its focused white beam swallowed by the ambient, sourceless blue glow that grew stronger with every step I took down. The staircase was longer than I expected, spiraling down at a gentle, comfortable angle. I counted 50 steps before I reached the bottom. The metal platform I had stomped on was waiting there, now flush with the floor of a perfectly cubical room. When my second foot touched the floor, the entrance above me sealed with that same whisper of air, plunging me into the world of blue light. For a terrifying second, I was trapped. I spun around, looking up, but the ceiling was as seamless and solid as the walls and floor. There was no way out. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the profound silence. I forced myself to breathe, to take in my surroundings. The room was maybe 20 feet on all sides. The walls, floor, and ceiling were all crafted from that same dark, matte metal. There were no seams, no bolts, no welds. It was as if the entire chamber had been carved from a single, massive block of unknown material. The blue light didn't come from a fixture. It seemed to emanate from the very air itself, or perhaps from the walls, casting no shadows. In the exact center of the room stood a pedestal, about waist-high, made of the same material. From its flat-top surface pulsed the source of the light, a gentle, rhythmic ebb and flow like a slow, sleeping heartbeat. It was the only object in the entire sterile space. It felt less like a basement and more like a sanctuary, or a tomb. I walked the perimeter, running my hand along one of the walls. The surface was impossibly smooth and had a strange, almost organic warmth to it. As my fingers trailed across it, a faint, silvery script, like liquid mercury, momentarily traced the path of my touch before fading back into the darkness of the metal. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned. It was a language I couldn't comprehend, full of elegant curves and sharp, geometric angles. It was beautiful, and it terrified me. This place wasn't just old. It was ancient in a way I couldn't process. The house above, with its century of decay, felt like a fleeting mayfly in comparison. This room felt eternal. Who could have built this? And how did they build it under a logger's cheap clapboard house in the middle of nowhere without anyone ever knowing? The questions swirled in my head, making me dizzy. My feet, acting on their own accord, carried me toward the central pedestal. The pulsing blue light washed over me, and the low hum I'd heard before was more pronounced here, a vibration I could feel deep in my bones. The top of the pedestal was a flat, circular screen of what looked like black glass. As I drew closer, a single, simple symbol materialized in the center of the glass in glowing blue lines, the shape of a human handprint. It was an invitation, an obvious, terrifyingly simple invitation. This was the moment of truth. My whole life, I'd been a passive observer, clicking boxes on a screen, watching stories unfold from a distance. Here, I was the one with his hand on the switch. What would happen if I touched it? Would alarms blare? Would the floor open up and drop me into an incinerator? Or would it simply answer the questions that were screaming in my mind? I wiped my sweaty, grimy palm on my jeans. My hand trembled as I raised it. I looked at my own hand calloused from the crowbar, dirt caked under the nails, and then at the perfect stylized icon on the screen. With my heart pounding in my ears, I pressed my palm against the glass. The surface wasn't cold, it was warm, and it vibrated with a sudden, intense energy that shot up my arm. The hum in the room escalated into a deep, resonant chord that made my teeth ache. The blue light from the pedestal flared, momentarily blinding me. I cried out and stumbled back, shielding my eyes. When I could see again, the room had transformed. The pedestal itself was now dark, but the chamber was filled with a swirling cosmos of light. In the center of the room, where the pedestal's light had been, a three-dimensional image was forming. It coalesced from a million points of light into a perfect, rotating sphere. It was the Earth. I stared, mesmerized. It wasn't a drawing or a simple graphic. It was a living, breathing model. I could see the swirl of weather patterns, the flicker of city lights on the night side, the deep, shimmering blue of the oceans. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I took a step closer, reaching out as if to touch a continent, but then something changed. A single pinprick of red light appeared on the surface of the holographic globe, located somewhere in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. It began to pulse, a tiny crimson beacon. My beacon. It was right where I was standing. My blood ran cold. I had just announced my presence. Then another red dot appeared, this one in the Siberian tundra, then another in the Sahara Desert, and another deep in the Amazon rainforest. In a matter of seconds, the globe was swarmed with them. Hundreds, then thousands of red dots lit up across every continent, under the deepest parts of the ocean, on the highest mountain peaks. The silent, sleeping planet was now covered in a network of angry red lights. I was staring at a map, I realized, but not a map of cities or countries. It was a map of these places, these hidden rooms, and I had just woken them all up. As this horrifying realization settled over me, the air crackled and a new image formed above the globe. It was text, written in that same flowing, alien script from the walls. I watched in stunned silence as the unfamiliar symbols shimmered, twisted, and then rearranged themselves into two stark, terrifying words in perfect block-letter English. System activated. Global awakening initiated. The words hung in the air, glowing with an ominous finality. System activated. Global awakening initiated. My mind struggled to catch up, to process the sheer magnitude of what I had just done. I hadn't just found a secret room. I had flipped a switch on a global scale. The thousands of pulsing red dots on the holographic Earth were like a rash, a planetary fever, and I was patient zero. I felt a wave of nausea so profound that I had to brace myself against the smooth metal wall. The cool surface did little to stop the trembling in my hands. What had I awakened? A network of what? Bunkers, data centers, weapons. The sterile, silent perfection of the room gave nothing away. It felt ancient, but the technology was light years beyond anything I'd ever conceived. The silence, which had at first been peaceful, now felt menacing, like the held breath before a scream. The holographic display began to change again. The globe of the Earth shrank, moving to one side of the room, while a new, larger projection took center stage. It was a star chart, but unlike any I had ever seen. Constellations were connected by faint, pulsing lines of light, creating an impossibly complex web that spanned the entire projected space. It wasn't just a map of the sky as seen from Earth. It was a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. One particular star system, far out on one of the spiral arms, began to glow with a brilliant golden light. A line of that same light shot out from it, traversing the star map with impossible speed, following a complex path through nebulae and star clusters until it terminated at a familiar-looking yellow star. Our sun. My throat was so dry I couldn't swallow. This wasn't just a map. It was a flight path, a route, and the final destination was us. As if to confirm my terror, a small window opened up next to the star chart, displaying a series of rapidly changing numbers and symbols from that alien language. I couldn't read them, of course, but one thing was universally understood: a countdown timer. It started at a high, incomprehensible number, but it was ticking down at an alarming rate. It wasn't counting down in seconds, but in some other unit of time. Even so, the message was clear. Something was coming. And by activating this system, I had just sent out the galaxy's biggest and brightest dinner bell. Panic finally shattered my paralysis. I had to get out. I scrambled back toward the spot where I had entered, my eyes darting wildly around the seamless room for any sign of a control panel, a button, an escape hatch. There was nothing. Just smooth, dark, impassive metal. "Let me out!" I yelled, my voice sounding small and pathetic in the silent chamber. "Open up!" I pounded my fists against the wall where the staircase should be, the impacts making a dull, unsatisfying thud. The holographic map of a coming invasion didn't even flicker. My desperation gave way to a cold, analytical dread. The handprint on the pedestal had activated the system. Maybe it could deactivate it too. I stumbled back to the center of the room and slammed my palm down on the dark glass circle. Nothing happened. The light show continued unabated. I tried my other hand. I tried pressing with just one finger. I tried yelling at it, pleading with the silent, unknowable machine. It remained completely unresponsive. It had only been designed to turn on. There was no off switch. Defeated, I sank to the floor, my back against the pedestal, and watched the countdown timer tick away. What had I done? My simple dream of escaping the city, of building something with my own two hands, had morphed into a nightmare of cosmic proportions. I had, in my ignorant fumbling, potentially doomed the entire planet. The weight of it was crushing, a physical pressure on my chest that made it hard to breathe. The forgotten house wasn't just forgotten. It was a quarantine, a carefully constructed cage for this terminal. And I had just picked the lock. How long did I sit there? An hour? 2? Time seemed to lose all meaning in the shadowless blue light. My mind raced through scenarios, each one more horrific than the last. Would it be a single ship? A fleet? What did they want? The builders of this room were obviously not human. Would they be peaceful explorers or ruthless conquerors? The term global awakening didn't sound particularly friendly. It sounded like flipping the lights on in a roach-infested kitchen. And we were the roaches. Just as I was about to be completely consumed by despair, the room chimed again. It was the same resonant tone I'd heard when I first stomped on the metal plate. I looked up. On the wall opposite the galactic map, a section of the metal shimmered and became translucent, like smoke behind glass. An image resolved itself on the newly formed screen. It was a view from outside. I gasped. I wasn't seeing the dingy, sunlit living room of the house. I was seeing the dark, overgrown yard, illuminated by the pale light of the moon. Night had fallen. But that wasn't what made the air freeze in my lungs. Standing in the middle of the yard, perfectly still, was a figure. It was tall and unnaturally thin, its limbs too long for its body. It was clad in something dark and sleek that seemed to drink the moonlight, making it difficult to discern its exact shape. It wasn't moving, just standing there, facing the house, facing me. It was as if it knew I was down here, watching. It felt like a predator that had just scented its prey. I realized with a jolt of pure terror that this wasn't a security camera feed. The viewing angle was too low, too close to the ground. This window was looking out from a point just above the soil, somewhere near the house's foundation, and the creature, or person, or whatever it was looking right at it. Then it moved. It didn't walk. It flowed across the overgrown lawn with a liquid grace that was both beautiful and utterly horrifying. It covered the 50 feet to the porch in a matter of seconds without seeming to hurry. It didn't use the broken steps. It simply glided up onto the sagging porch, its form coalescing directly in front of the front door. It raised a long, slender arm, and the front door, which I had secured with a new deadbolt and a heavy wooden bar, was simply pushed open, not smashed, not kicked in. It swung inward with a soft creak, the deadbolt snapping with a sound like a dry twig, the heavy bar splintering into pieces as if it were a matchstick. My blood turned to ice. It was inside the house. I could hear it now, not through the screen, but through the very structure of the chamber around me. Faint rhythmic sounds from above. Footsteps. But they were wrong. They weren't the heavy tread of a boot or the soft patter of a bare foot. It was a soft, wet, dragging sound, punctuated by a sharp click. Drag, click, drag, click. It was slowly, deliberately, making its way across the living room floor I had just torn up. It was heading for the opening. It knew exactly where I was. The screen on the wall flickered and went dark. I was alone again in the blue light, with only the countdown timer and the terrifying sounds from above. Drag. Click. The sound was directly over my head now. It stopped. A new sound began. A low, guttural chittering, like 1,000 insects trapped in a jar. It was followed by a scraping sound. The sound of long, sharp claws dragging across the wooden floorboards right above the hidden entrance to my tomb. It was searching for the seam. It was trying to get in. The scraping sound from above was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard. It was the sound of methodical, intelligent malevolence. The chittering grew louder, a sound that vibrated down through the metal ceiling and seemed to burrow directly into my brainstem. My body was locked in a state of pure, primal fear. I was trapped in a box, 100 feet beneath the ground, and something alien and ancient was clawing at the lid. I scrambled away from the center of the room, pressing myself into a corner, as if the 2 feet of distance would offer some protection. The scraping stopped. Silence descended again, thick and absolute. I held my breath, listening, my ears straining for the slightest sound. Nothing. Had it given up? Gone away? The hope was a fragile, stupid thing, and it was shattered a moment later by a sound that was infinitely worse than the scraping. A high-pitched, resonant whine began to emanate from the ceiling, the same tone the pedestal had made, but amplified, distorted, and filled with a terrible energy. The seamless metal above me began to glow, first a dull red, then a brighter orange. It was being heated from the outside. That thing wasn't just trying to claw its way in, it was trying to melt its way in. Small droplets of molten metal, glowing like tears of fire, began to drip from the ceiling, sizzling as they hit the floor. The sterile air filled with the acrid smell of burning metal. This was it. I was going to be cooked alive in this alien tomb. My last sight a galactic countdown to an invasion I had personally invited. In that moment something inside me snapped. The terror didn't vanish, but it was joined by a surge of pure, defiant rage. I wasn't going to die cowering in a corner. I had started this, and if I was going to die, I was going to die trying to understand it. With a yell that was half scream, half war cry, I launched myself back toward the holographic display. The countdown timer was still ticking away. The golden line still pointed from a distant star system to our own. I stared at the swirling star chart, my mind racing, desperately searching for a pattern, a clue, anything. The system had activated with my handprint. It recognized me as human. Global awakening initiated. It wasn't an attack. It was a wake-up call. But who was being woken up? Us or them? And what was that creature upstairs? The star chart wasn't an invasion route. What if it was a warning? My eyes darted from the star chart to the globe of the Earth, still covered in its rash of red dots, one for every one of these chambers, and the creature upstairs. It had been drawn here, to this specific location, the moment I turned it on. It was a guardian, or a hunter. It hunted the signal. My mind latched onto a desperate, insane idea. The system wasn't a weapon or a communication device. It was a test, a filter. I looked at the pedestal. The handprint icon was gone, the surface dark and inert. It had accepted my input and locked me out. But the system was still active, still processing. The walls had reacted to my touch earlier, displaying that alien script. Maybe they were more than just walls. I ran to the wall nearest the star chart and pressed my palm flat against it, just as I had before. The silvery script bloomed under my hand. I didn't try to read it. I focused my intent, pouring all my panic and desperation into a single, coherent thought. A command. Show me. Show me what's coming. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the entire wall dissolved into a new display. It wasn't a map, it was a recording. I saw a planet, lush and green, teeming with cities of elegant crystalline spires. It was beautiful. Then I saw them, swarms of them, creatures of nightmare, part insect, part machine, descending from a black sky, stripping the planet bare, consuming everything. They were a galactic locust plague, and I recognized the guttural chittering sound from upstairs. It was the sound they made as they fed. The recording shifted. It showed another world, then another, all falling to this relentless, devouring swarm. And then I saw the builders of the room. They were tall, graceful beings of light, fighting a desperate, losing war. Finally, I saw them enact their final plan. They seeded their technology across the galaxy on countless primitive worlds, hiding these chambers deep beneath the ground. They weren't beacons. They were arcs of knowledge, of their culture, their history. And they were alarms. The system was designed to be found only by a species that had achieved a certain level of curiosity and technological competence, the ability to dig, to reason, to wonder what was under the floor. The global awakening wasn't a call to invaders. It was a warning to the other hidden chambers on Earth. And the creature upstairs, that was one of them, the locusts, a scout, dormant for eons, buried nearby, awakened by the signal, sent to destroy the alarm before it could be fully understood. The ceiling was glowing a fierce bright white. More molten metal was dripping now, the room becoming unbearably hot. I had seconds. I understood now. The test wasn't just turning it on. The test was figuring out what to do next. It was a cry for help, a legacy entrusted to strangers. They couldn't fight the swarm, so they had laid 1 billion breadcrumbs across the cosmos, hoping someone, anyone, would find their message and prepare. I spun back to the main display. The golden line still pointed to Earth. The countdown was still running. It wasn't an ETA for an invasion fleet. It was a data burst. The entire sum of their knowledge, their science, their history, their weapons technology, a survival kit for a doomed galaxy. It was being beamed from their home system, or what was left of it, to the first primitive species to answer the call. And in a few minutes it would arrive. If the hunter upstairs didn't destroy this terminal first, there had to be a defense mechanism. There had to be. My eyes scanned the room, the walls, the floor. I saw nothing. Then my gaze fell upon the only other feature of the room, the square platform I had descended on. It had lowered me in. Maybe it could do something else. I sprinted to the platform and stomped on it, just as I had in the living room. Nothing happened. I stomped again, harder, yelling with frustration. Then I saw it. Faint lines were etched into the surface of the platform. Lines I hadn't noticed in the calm blue light. It wasn't a featureless square. It was a diagram, a schematic. At the center was a circle with lines radiating outward, a power source, and branching off it were other symbols, one of which looked like a shield. I slammed my palm down on the shield symbol. The entire chamber shuddered. A deafening roar erupted from all around me, and the gentle blue light was replaced by a blinding, ferocious white. A wave of pure energy, visible as a ripple in the air, expanded from the walls and converged on the ceiling. There was a concussive boom that I felt in my bones, followed by an unearthly shriek from above, a sound of unimaginable pain and fury, cut short, and then silence. The white light faded back to the calm blue. The unbearable heat dissipated. The dripping stopped. On the floor, the small puddles of solidified metal were the only evidence of what had just happened. I looked at the holographic display. The countdown timer had hit 0. The golden line on the star chart flared brilliantly, and then the entire display, the map, the globe, everything dissolved into a torrential swirling river of that silvery alien script. It flowed from the walls, from the pedestal, from the very air, pouring into my mind. It wasn't a sight, it was an experience. I felt an influx of information so vast it was painful, eons of history, astrophysics that shattered human understanding, engineering principles that defied the laws of physics, the sorrow of a dying race, and the fierce burning hope they had placed in me, in us. When it was over, the room was just a room again. The displays were dark. The pedestal was inert. A soft chiming sound broke the silence, and I looked up to see the entrance above me sliding open, revealing the dusty, debris-strewn floor of the living room. Morning light streamed through the grimy windows. I climbed the metal stairs, my legs shaking, my mind a maelstrom of alien knowledge. Where the creature had stood, there was now only a pile of fine, black ash, and a deep, scorched crater in the center of my floor. I walked out onto the porch of my $10 house. The sun was rising, casting long shadows through the skeletal oak trees. The world looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, but it wasn't. It was a world on the brink, a world with a fighting chance it didn't even know it had. They had thought I was crazy for buying this forgotten place. They had no idea. I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was a librarian. And I had a whole world to teach.